everyone, my name's Christina and I am a travel agent with As You Wish Vacations. While I book many vacation destinations, I specialize in the Disney products, and this video series focuses on Disney Cruise Line specifically. Okay, I'm gonna get real with you guys for a second. So when I first started doing these, I started being, I was scripted and I had a teleprompter, and that just really didn't work. It wasn't me, so I've been doing these with just some notes on my board in front of me, and I have been kind of doing a lot of it from memory. Well, I got to this week and there is no way I can do that. So I thought this one was going to be easy because we're talking about Northern Europe this week. So if you've been following along, you know we've been talking about all the different itineraries that the Disney Cruise Line goes on, and we've been doing them by region. So I've been on a Caribbean cruise, I've been on a Mediterranean cruise, I'm a travel agent, so I learned all about Alaska cruises and I've booked a ton of them. I have not booked any Northern Europe cruises, and I'm not super familiar with the destinations. They are number one on my bucket list, so doing this was really, really eye-opening and just made me want to go even more, but I'm not as familiar. So if you see me looking down a lot more in this video, I apologize. I need to use my notes for this one, and I usually have just this little tiny whiteboard with my notes. Well, this is like 3 whiteboards, so bear with me. There's a lot of information. I'm not going to go as in-depth as I used to, or as I usually do, just because there's so much. If you want more information, feel free to reach out to me. I'm happy to walk you through everything. All of this research, I'm super prepared now, and all of this information is on my website as well, aywchristina.com. In my blog post about Northern Europe, there is all of the destinations, and there's all of the itineraries, and there's a selection of the excursions. Okay, so sorry for that that disclaimer up front, but let's just jump in. So I thought this was going to be easy because there's not that many itineraries for Northern Europe, but they are so dense and they're so cool. So we'll start with the 7 nights from Dover. There's only one departure of these per year, and then there's 2 7 nights from Dover, but they have completely different itineraries. So the first one, you leave from Dover, which is a port about 40 minutes to an hour outside of London. So it's officially London's port, but it is farther from the city. It's down south. So you leave Dover, you have a day at sea. You spend a day in Copenhagen, you spend a day in Oslo, Norway, you spend a day in Kristiansand, Norway, you spend a day at sea, and then you're back in Dover. So that's the first itinerary. The next one is completely different, also a 7-night from Dover. You have a night in Amsterdam, you have a day at sea, you have a night in Copenhagen, or a day in Copenhagen, I'm sorry, not a night, you're not spending a night there. You have a day in Gothenburg, Sweden, and you have a day in Stavanger, Norway, a day at sea, and then you're back in Dover. Okay. Then you have a 7-night Northern Europe from Copenhagen. So you'd be leaving from Copenhagen and returning to Copenhagen, so that one has a day at sea. That one has a day in Tallinn, Estonia, which is one of the most beautiful fairy tale cities. I've actually met with the tourist board from Tallinn, and it's definitely up there on my bucket list. It's a beautiful destination. You have St. Petersburg, where you do spend a night. So you have 2 days in St. Petersburg with an overnight, so that you can go to the ballet and do all of that stuff. You have a day in Helsinki, you have a day in Stockholm, you have a day at sea, and then you have a day in Frederica. I'm probably mispronouncing that, in Denmark. And then you're back in Copenhagen. Then you have a 7-night Norwegian fjords. And this is what I would love to see. So you have a day at sea, and then these are all ports in Norway. So again, I'm probably butchering how they're pronounced. You have Alesund, you have Guringer, Olden, and Stavanger. And so this is a very active itinerary. You're doing a lot of hiking and kayaking, and because you are in this beautiful these beautiful places, these beautiful fjords and glaciers, and so it's not as city port intensive. You're not just doing the city tours. There's so much to see and do. There's hikes to waterfalls. We'll get into all of that in a minute. Then you have a 7-night British Isle tour. You have a day at sea, a day in Dublin, a day in Belfast, a day in Greencock, which is a good jumping off point for either going to Glasgow or Edinburgh, Scotland. Then you have a day in Liverpool and a day at sea. So this is what Disney has for their itineraries in Northern Europe. They just introduced a new one. It's a 10-night Norwegian fjords, and it includes Reykjavik, Iceland. So there's not a whole lot out about that itinerary yet. It is bookable, but I don't have a ton of information, so I didn't include it on here. If you want more information about that, I will have my contact information at the end of the video and below. Okay, that was a lot. So there's only four itineraries, but there's all these different ports. They're all amazing ports. So I don't know how you would pick between them, but they're all really cool, and there's only one departure per year. So if you are interested in one of these, let's book your 2019 vacation now. Let's get you on the waiting list for 2020. Half of 2020 is already booking. The second half is not yet, so we don't, these are more towards the second half. Oh, I didn't do that at the beginning of the video. So we've been talking about the way the magic moves around the world. So the Disney Magic, so if we start in January, starts in the Caribbean and does a ton of Caribbean and Bahamas cruises down there. And then it does a transatlantic in May across the Atlantic. It does the Mediterranean for the summer. So you'll be there from May, June, July, August. Then in September it will come up, do all these Northern Europe cruises. Then it will do a transatlantic from Dover, which again is London's port, over to New York. It will do some Bermuda cruises from New York, and it will do some Canadian cruises from New York before going back down to Florida in December. Okay, so this is kind of in that August, September, late summer, early fall region of time. And these are all on the Disney Magic. Next week I'll start talking about the different Disney ships and whether you should, what the differences between the ships are. Okay, anyway, so let's talk about these ports. These are in the order of which I have them listed in itineraries on my blog, so they're kind of all over the place in this sense. And so we're going to start with Copenhagen. So this is been a place on my bucket list since the 4th grade when I did a report on Denmark. I have always wanted to go here. I don't know why when I was living in London I didn't go to Copenhagen, but it is definitely on my list now. There's some really cool Disney connections here as well. You have the Little Mermaid statue, you have all sorts of Hans Christian Andersen history and the fairy tales. This is just such a world of those fairy tales. And then you have all sorts of canal cruises. It's very similar to Amsterdam in that the city is built all on the canals. You have Kronborg Castle, which is the castle that inspired Hamlet. So there is so much here. And then there's Tivoli Gardens, which is the amusement park that inspired Walt Disney to create Disneyland. So there's a few things that inspired Disneyland. One is Griffith Park in LA, the carousel there, and the other is Tivoli Gardens in Denmark. So they have a really cool excursion where you can follow Walt's footsteps and learn the history of his trip there and what there inspired what in Disneyland. So that's a really cool excursion. Then you have Oslo, Norway. Oslo has all sorts of museums, incredible museums in Oslo. One is the Viking Museum. You also have these living museums. So you have different museums that represent different eras in Norwegian history. So you might have one from the Viking era, one from medieval times, one from Iron Age, and that's how people in Norway lived during those times. So you can visit those living museums. Living museum is if you've ever been to some place like Plymouth Plantation, or I can't think of the one in Virginia right now, but it's where you have costume characters that reenact what their lives would have been like. You have Kristiansand, Norway, which has all sorts of fjord fun. You have ribboat rides, you have river rafting, and then you have some Norwegian cultural things as well. You have a cooking class, you have a home visit, and then there's also a mineral park there, which is cool. Then you have Bergen, Norway, which again is a ton of outdoor activities, hiking to waterfalls, biking around the town, home visits, again, visits to farms, to taste cheese and all of that really cool stuff, learn how to make different Norwegian delicacies. I don't know if school bread is a real Norwegian delicacy. That's something I want to find out. But if you've ever been to Walt Disney World and you've been to Norway in Epcot, you know that school bread is this delicious fried donut with cream in the middle, rolled in coconut, and it's delicious. And if it's really in Norway, that's pushing it. It's already at the top of my bucket list. It will push it over the top. Then you have Amsterdam, definitely a popular tourist destination. You have the canals, you have history, you have the museums. I think really popular here would be the city tours, the canal tours, and the Anne Frank house. There's a museum there now in the house that she actually wrote her book from. You have food tours, you have excursions out to Delft, which is known for its pottery. You have excursions out to Haarlem, which is a farming community, and there's also a piece of that excursion that brings you to where the tale of Hans Brinker started. And Hans Brinker is the little Dutch boy who put his finger in the dike to stop the water from coming out. So he then had a pair of silver skates. I don't know how the real Hans Brinker and the silver skates relate, but you have that. And then Van Gogh also lived in Amsterdam, and they have a Van Gogh museum there, and they have painting excursions where you can learn to paint like Van Gogh. So that's Amsterdam. Now we're going to get into some of the the Norwegian ports. I'm going to have to take out my paper for that because not everything fit on my whiteboard. So you have Stavanger, which again I mentioned they have a living museum of the Iron Age. They had one in Oslo. They also have one in Stavanger. You have hiking, you have your home visits, you have your tours of the fjord. So I think when you're doing a Norwegian itinerary, it's important to do a home visit in one of the ports, a ribboat excursion in another, and then a hike and another. So you're definitely getting, you get to do all of these different things. Just figuring out which one to do and which port is going to be the hard part. Then you have Ålesund, Norway, which has a lot of troll history. So you have the Path of the Trolls, you have troll adventures, you have a troll experience for kids, you have island adventures, there's little bridges to all these little islands, you have kayaking, and then they have this really cool excursion where you go to one of those living museums and you are learning about this village, and some friends from nearby Arendelle stop by. So your kids can meet Anna and Elsa and Kristoff in Norway, which is really, really, really cool. Now I told you I'm going to have to take out my paper. Then you have Greringer, Norway, which has this beautiful, beautiful waterfall. So you can either hike to the waterfall, you can go up to the viewpoint by bus, or you could take a helicopter. You can also kayak around the waterfall. So that's a really cool port as well. And then you have Olden, which has the glacier, and they have all sorts of fishing excursions there. They have a crayfish excursion, they have a fjord fishing excursion, and then they have a horse center. So this is really the only one where you can see those really beautiful Norwegian horses. So really, really cool itinerary on any of the Norway cruises. And what I will say, I have a cousin that we grew up thinking he was crazy. He travels the entire world. He's climbed Everest. He's traveled with a Bedouin tribe by camel through the desert in Egypt. He's lived with an Aboriginal tribe in Australia. He's just been everywhere. I think he's been everywhere, really. And the place that he would want to go back and that he said is the most beautiful place is Norway. So another reason it's the top of my bucket list. So I need your help. Keep booking vacations so I can go to Norway. All right, moving on. The British Isles cruise. You have, this one I can talk about a little bit better. You have Dublin. So Dublin, Ireland is definitely, Ireland is such a small little country that you can do a lot in Ireland. You don't have to stay in Dublin. If you've never been to Dublin, I definitely recommend you stay in Dublin, spend the day there, see all the colorful homes, go to the Guinness factory, just kind of walk around on your own. You don't even need to do an excursion in Dublin. But they do have one that goes out to the Blarney Stone, so if you want to kiss the Blarney Stone. They have river dance excursions. They have whiskey and Guinness, and you can go out to the farms, you can go out to see sheep, you can, oh, sorry guys, there's countryside tours, you can go down to County Wicklow, there's one out to Waterford to see the Crystal Factory. So there's tons to do in the Port of Dublin, but if you've never been, just kind of stay, walk around, go down to the Temple Bar area, and have a pint of Guinness. Also a ton to do with kids in Dublin. There's like so many parks, so many castles, fairy tale, folklore, tons of stuff for kids as well. So it's more than just Guinness and whiskey and crystal. Then you have Greencock, Scotland, which is your jumping off point for Glasgow and Edinburgh. Edinburgh is a little bit more historic. They have the famous Edinburgh Castle. It's a medieval town. Glasgow's a little more contemporary. Similar to Berlin in that it's very avant-garde, so you can do all sorts of food tours, museum tours, art tours in Glasgow, or you can go to Edinburgh and go a little bit more traditional and do a medieval tour. There's medieval activities where kids learn archery and things like that. There's one really cool one where the kids will go off with the counselors and learn about medieval coats of arms and create their own medieval coats of arms while you kind of walk around, shop, have a drink, probably some scotch, and then you come back and as a family you get to meet Merida in Scotland, which again is really cool. I love that they incorporate these their characters into some of these excursions and the places that inspired them. Then you have Liverpool, which if you are a Beatles fan, you know that the Beatles are from Liverpool, and they have a Beatles tour. Of course, they have Beatles karaoke in one of the bars that they used to perform in. They have, again, food tours in Liverpool. They have a football tour, so you will go to the Liverpool Stadium and you'll get to go behind the scenes and see the stadium and then go to a football game. Then they have, if you have younger kids, they have like a Beatrix Potter Park where they have Mr. McGregor's garden, and they have different areas from her books. So that's a really cool excursion as well. Okay, so now we're going to talk about some of the Northern Europe, Eastern Europe places. Tallinn, Estonia, I mentioned a little bit earlier when I was talking about the itinerary that I've met with the tourist board from Tallinn, and I had never heard of it before, and now I really want to go. It's this little land of fairy tales. My favorite place I've ever been is Prague in Czechoslovakia, and Tallinn reminds me a ton of Prague. Still has a lot of that history. It's not as modernized or westernized as some of the other cities that you visit in Europe. So Tallinn, Estonia is definitely one I want to visit. They have all sorts of architecture tours. They have a marzipan making excursion, and they have private concerts with traditional musicians. Couldn't think of the word for musicians. Sorry, guys. Then you have St. Petersburg, and St. Petersburg is beautiful, also on my list. And you have that old meets new, you have the communist history, you have the empire history, so you have all the Tsars, all of their palaces, all of their homes, the Hermitage, where Catherine the Great was They have all sorts of excursions there. It's a museum that you can visit on your own, but with Disney you get a private concert or a royal ball or exclusive access after it's closed, so you're not with the crowds at the Hermitage. They have ballet nights, because you remember you're there overnight, so you can do your St. Petersburg tour during the day and then book your night at the ballet. And that night at the ballet you have access backstage after the show, and you get to meet some of the ballerinas. They also have a ballet class that you can take that would be on board, but it would be with some of the principal dancers from one of the Russian ballets. You have the Fabergé Museum. You can do home visits, cooking classes, and because you have 2 days there, you can get so much in. Then lastly, you have Helsinki, Finland. Finland is kind of a bunch of islands, so you have all sorts of archipelago speedboat tours, helicopter tours to see all those different islands. You also have chocolate tours. You have a private visit, so this is not something that's accessible to the public, but it is for Disney. Bjorn Weekstone? I'm sorry, I don't know how to pronounce his name. All I know is, you know that beautiful necklace that Carrie Fisher wears at the end of Empire? That beautiful silver chunky square necklace? He designed that. And so he designed a lot of her costumes, a lot of her jewelry, and so you have a private access to his home. They also have reindeer excursions where you can go up to see some of Santa's reindeer. So so many great destinations. And then again, they have the Norwegian fjords where they're adding Iceland. I know Iceland is a very popular destination right now. It was probably the top destination of 2017. So obviously 2018 destinations haven't come out yet, but in terms of growth and numbers, Iceland was up there. So if that's something you'd like to do, I definitely think pairing it with the Norwegian fjords is the way to do it. All of these are amazing, amazing cruises, and if you would like more information, a no obligation quote, if you want to just talk to me about how much you want to go there and can't afford it like me, I'm happy to help. I'd love to hear from you. If you guys could comment below with what of these ports has you most excited, or what's on the top of your bucket list, I would love to hear from you. Email me, Christina at aywvacations.com, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, at aywchristina. That's where you'll get the most deals and discounts and up-to-date information. That's it. Thank you. Please subscribe to my channel. That helps other people find me, and if you found this helpful, will help them find this helpful information. Thank you guys all for joining me. I'm sorry it was such a long one. I hope all of your vacations are exactly as you wish.